It's transport in the time of COVID-19, update 23rd of November. Hello, everybody. Okay, so don't forget to send stuff for me there. Look at our website for previous editions, YouTube stuff and whatnot. Okay, so this week, yes, bloody hell, here's something from Department for Transport, PM to announce electric vehicle revolution. England will lead the world by requiring all new buildings to have electric vehicle charge points installed. And as various people have been pointing out, there already are charge points, there are ordinary electric points. And what new households need is they need good quality, secure and convenient cycle storage. They need high quality cycle infrastructure linking the homes to places where people need to get to. They need good public transport. They need a good environment for people to walk about in, and they should not be car dependent. And that's what we actually need. Which comes back to what we were talking about last week with the failures of COP26, which I and more importantly, Carlton Reid went on about at length. I think at some stage we may have to actually do a kind of how we feel as human beings, you know, how do we feel after COP26, and, you know, to look at our own psyches and see how we're suffering or not, because it's still with us, as is, of course, the budget and the comprehensive spending review with making motoring even cheaper and building more roads. So that's all in the background, it's all there. Okay, here's something from the European Commission, and this is, again, the different way of measuring safety on the road. It's the who or what kills whom, which I've talked about. It's the report which PACTS did with my input, and which has now finally been accepted as a way of measuring things. It's an alternative metric to the normal one of totting up actual aggregate casualties. It doesn't look at the victim, it looks at the other road user involved. Now, this one isn't as good as the one which PACTS did with my input, because it doesn't have a metric which looks at the casualty rate, looking at the mileage done by each mode. So it's not as good, but it's pretty good at seeing, looking at the fatalities of groups and looking at which kind of other road users is involved. And so you see cars come out pretty high up. That's the kind of way that we need to look at things. As I say, it's more complicated because it doesn't involve casualty rates, doesn't have the right denominator, and that's going to be difficult when you're looking at things in the EU, because you only really have a good traffic index for cyclists in Denmark, the Netherlands, and the UK. The other countries you don't, so it's not that brilliant, but it's better, or at least an adjunct to the normal ways of looking at casualties. Okay. Oh yes, it's been Break Road Safety Week, which is paid for by Department for Transport with Break Road Safety. So here's your victim blaming for tonight. There's been plenty of it. This is, I don't know who Proudfoots are, but there's a tweet saying, many thanks to Proudfoots for buying all our pupils these reflective bands when they're walking or cycling or whatever. And here are the kids saying, all good. A few of them are obviously kind of taking the piss, but which is quite nice to see. But they're still going to be having the message that road safety is about pedestrians and cyclists wearing some reflective tat. I mentioned this last week. This is the joint letter on cycling, which went from cycling bodies and Road Danger Reduction Forum and others to COP26. Whatever good it did, just having that little bit at the end of the declaration saying that along with electric vehicles, which is all this bit here, there should be some recognition of public transport and active travel. Yeah, this is a special list of reading for COP26. Um, Ben Knowles on why COP26 organised failed to mention cycling for transport. Michael Jacobs, very long summary of what was decided. Carlton Reid's summary there. Leo Murray's very accurate. I mean, I know I've repeated this twice, but it's a very accurate summary of what Sunak's got wrong. Nice short video by Carlton there. Good piece there. Damien Carrington, another kind of summary of where we are. Julian Allwood, I'm putting out that new. He's a very good academic on how technology will not solve the problem of climate change. This is a very short piece. Christiana Figueres is a sort of establishment figure on her take on COP26. Here's the piece you need to look at, academic piece on how much carbon dioxide can be saved by walking and cycling. And there's one of the protests in Glasgow. Greg Marsden's article there, his alternative decarbonisation plan. And yes, here again, Roger Gaffin, Cycling UK, the latest on debates in Westminster Hall about tackling road injustice. Do read his blog, it's very important there under new. Qualities page, there's a group called Cycle Sisters. They're trying to set up new groups. Sorry about all the high vis they seem to be into. It's an organization to encourage Muslim women to cycle, and they are pretty good otherwise. And there's your reading list, same old reading list. I took the liberty of putting in my piece on what's wrong with electric cars. Are they a small step forward or a red herring? Because everything seems to be about EVs now. There was a program about EVs last night on Channel 4, and it really does seem to be very much a kind of how it's bad if it doesn't make life convenient for the car driver, but nothing about how it may not be an adequate solution for greenhouse gas emissions, let alone other things. There's some more reading. Here's something nice from University of Hertfordshire. Stephen Jacobs is there about developments in rural areas. And a nice little letter from one of the air quality people about how electric cars are not a magic bullet for air pollution, which is poor air quality, let alone greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, I mentioned that this last week from the minister about expressions of interest have been received from more than 30 local authorities wishing to build mini Hollands. Okay, look at that if you're interested in mini Hollands. Brighton and Hove, I mentioned this last week. What do people feel about the docking of funding? Because it may be losing funding for good quality active travel schemes. I mean, it does get the message out that road space reallocation has to be done, but is it getting local authorities into a position where they may end up doing less for active travel? Your views are welcome. Yeah, national parks, there was stuff about how tourist cars may be banned from the most popular parts of the Lake District, so you'd have low traffic neighbourhoods there. But that seems to have been wishful thinking, and it's probably not a thing after all. Bournemouth and Poole, yay, campaign win, judicial review supports the Keyhole Bridge Group. Very well done, the people there. A minor but good victory. Hertsmere, yes, I mentioned that at the beginning. Important area for people who want to cycle and walk outside of North London, which is being threatened by massive development. So if you're involved, either contact me, I can put you in touch with the campaigners. And so there's your draft local plan, which you can have a say in if you ever go into that area, or contact me, or both. Oh yeah, now potty language alert. Manchester City Council has been putting boxes on the footway, and some people who, of course, we do not in any way condone the use of bad language or putting comments on items of street furniture. Nevertheless, I should let you know that comments are going on these boxes, which seem to be clogging up the footway. And there's one suggesting that Manchester City Council has been self-contradictory or dishonest. And there are other comments and witticisms and bad language on these boxes throughout Manchester, or Manchester, part of Manchester covered by Manchester City Council. Now London. Yes, another bit of data showing that traffic has been down around the Homerton low traffic neighbourhood. Good quality monitoring and evidence to support the case for LTN. So that's another one for your bulging files. Yeah, I mentioned this last week, but I you know, when I wasn't here, it was recorded, but I like your views. Baroness Vere was making sarcastic comments about a Conservative council, that well-known hub and hive of interest in cycling snarky comment. And she talked about the Active Travel Oversight Group, and I don't know what that is. Is it a formally defined group and Department for Transport, a precursor of Active Travel England, or is it just a sort of informal name for officers in the department who have administered the allocations in active travel funding tranches? Your views are welcome. Yeah, now here's an article on the LCC website saying it's a monitoring of what has been done over the last 5 years. And it's suggesting that, you know, it's a sort of could do better report, but you have to look at it yourself. A lot of voluntary work has gone into that. Hammersmith and also TfL at Hammersmith Gyratory, which is a stonking great gyratory for any of you who don't know it. We plan to start building the Hammersmith Gyratory section of Cycleway 9 from 6th of December 2021. And that will be, when it's in, will be quite a dramatic change if it goes ahead in the way which I think it will. And hopefully there'll be a lot of pictures and videos about that, because this will be relevant to anybody in Britain about what you can do at a quite fantastically intimidating gyratory. Okay, so drawing to the end now. When I was about 30, I had something called ME, myalgic encephalitis, etc., post-viral fatigue syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, and I couldn't ride my bike as much as I wanted to, and I was very upset and morose. And a doctor said to me, well, okay, you're not going to be able to cycle as much as you want to, but think about what you're going to do when you're 60. So last week was my 70th birthday, and I celebrated by going for a bike ride of 70 kilometers. And so that just shows that if you keep at it, yeah, you can keep cycling into late middle-aged and longer. Here's a guy who's 75 and he does about 10,000 miles a year. Here, of course, is Brenda Pesh of Parklets fame, and here we are in the Chilterns having a good time. So, little personal note at the end, and I've kept it down to about 20 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Any comments about the things I was saying, particularly about Kensington, Chelsea, also about what you feel about you know, the active travel funding and so on. Mark's got his hand up. Mark?
Is that all right, Brian?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was taking over.
Deferring to Brian's sharing. I don't know who to defer to. I think it's slightly different. I think it's only fair to recognise what the situation was in Brighton. It wasn't the whole council, it was the Labour group and the Conservative group. And the officers were mightily miffed, as was the administration, by what happened. So they've been having discussions with the DFT about what's going. The DFT started off with Gilligan started off with an assumption of everything's going to get cut, it's going to go to zero. And the officers persuaded them that everything else they were doing was actually really good, and it was this one thing. So it was agreed, I don't think that's the right word. The DFT felt that there had to be a obvious penalty, and this was a fair penalty that made it clear that it wasn't going to be, you couldn't get off scot-free, but that the officers and the administration had tried all in their power to not make it happen. And it was done in that vein. I mean, it's still going to be one member of staff. It's going to be a lot of bikeability lost. So it's 75,000. So it's not a trivial loss, but it isn't 100%. And it was intended to send a message that if you did this and then you didn't do other schemes and you weren't trying to put other stuff in, then we would go further. So the context has got to be seen in the overall picture of it's a council that really generally wants to do things. We had a meeting last week about doing the seafront cycle track, which was basically the Greens supported it. This is extending the seafront cycle track. The Greens supported it. Labour supported it under duress, I think was the phrase they used. It was more or less, we don't know if we want to support this, but we think we'll lose more money, so we'll say yes. And the Tories actually abstained, which was unusual. Normally they'd vote against. So, and there'd be some chat about Tories in Brighton, Tory councillors in Brighton think that they have a hotline and talking complete bollocks about what the DFT were going to do when they had absolutely no, as far as I know, no connection to the DFT on that. So they're just making things up as they go along.
I think we're officially in the potty mouth edition now. We're definitely in the potty mouth edition of this one. Cheers for that, Mark. It's good to find out what's happening.
Sorry,
there.
yes, you're right. I'm swearing there.
You see, I mean, I was trying to raise it as a general issue about what will happen in local authorities that have been told you're not going to get as much money.
But this isn't This was not ATF. Remember, this was capability funding.
All right.
So this is revenue. This is revenue funding for bikeability and stuff like that. And other councils, Thurrock, who we're working with, other councils have also had. If you look down the table, it says the DFT is seeking reassurances, and that's the phrase they've been using. So if the reassurance is we won't do it again, or we're trying very hard, then the DFT responds by saying, well, you'll have a cut. If the council's reassurance is, well, we're really happy to do this and we're not going to do anything anywhere at all, then presumably the DFT would respond differently.
Yeah.
So I think everyone's take has got to be taken at the message as a whole.
Yeah. I think this has really got to be looked at as what happens in each case. One other thing, sorry, I didn't mention with regard to London, is that Transport for London is in serious dire straits economically, and so we're keeping an eye out on what actually happens, and that's terribly important. A lot of cycle training has been cut, and there is a prospect, unless the finances are sorted out, of nothing for active travel, cuts in bus travel, etc. So maybe Simon can say something, but anyway, Brian, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll bring in Graham first, and then Simon. Yeah, we'll get into where's all London's money gone in a minute. Graham.
Yeah, it's. I actually agree with these sanctions. I think, from where I come from, I think that our council needs to see sanctions. But what I really want to see is the original commitment that was in Gear Change, which is under the Active Travel England heading. It said Active Travel England's assessment of an authority's performance on active travel will influence the funding it receives for other forms of transport. And I think that's what we need to see if we're going to get a result from the stick part of this.
Yeah, we'll just let Sally in. Okay, we'll go to Simon. Cheers for that, Graham. I hope that as well.
Yeah, the DFT thing is, TfL thing is just major. So I don't know if you've discussed it yet. Sorry, I've been slightly late, but really, essentially, I've never seen City Hall and TfL this worried about this kind of stuff. So it's very hard to unpick whether some of this is obviously SEEK and TfL posturing in the run-up to another round of negotiations around funding coming up to December 11th, which is when TfL's money runs out, basically, and DfT has to agree another deal, or we start shutting the tubes and the buses and just turn the lights off in London. So there is a kind of there is a bit of political posturing to all of this noise coming out of London that basically says, as hopefully you've all seen, essentially, unless there is a properly hammered out deal now and a lot more funding than I think the DfT wants to give London, then we will cut 20% of buses, 10% of tubes, and pretty much every cycling scheme and every walking scheme can just go hang. So that's kind of the phrase that is being used over and over again from TfL to City Hall is managed decline. And there's a lot of talk about going back to the 70s and 80s in terms of transport. I think the kind of opposite of this is there is a gleefulness from some, Andy Burnham most notably, about funding and levelling up the North. And this is just basic level idiocy in my view. Like, does the North deserve better funding and better transport deal and sustainable transport and the HS2 extension and all sorts of other things to do with making the North a better place to get around, not in a car? Yeah, of course it bloody does. But does that mean that we should be rejoicing in a London that is rolling back the years and cancelling all its cycling schemes? Of course we shouldn't, particularly when we consider London as being a leader for the UK in terms of active travel and shifting people out of cars successfully, and buses and tubes and all sorts of things like that. So if we want the rest of the country and the metro regions particularly to kind of emulate London in terms of having a centralised transport authority, doing one ticket kind of oyster style things, rolling out cycle tracks, etc., the last thing we then want to do is start just destroying all that stuff and tearing it up. So yeah, we're really worried. There's a whole bunch of NGOs in London working on responses to this right now. But essentially, if this does come to pass, boy oh boy, is it going to be a bad thing.
Yeah, there's so much I could say about that, but I kind of know a lot of the parties involved. I'll just say, there are methods of generating revenue, distance-based road users charge, and we came up with a few of them. Did win, and the whole thing is starting to smack somewhat of the GLC bits from the 80s for the old timers.
Yeah, I mean, can I say something on that? That in a sense, if we got lucky, we could say, right, money needs to come in. The obvious thing is road user charging, smart charging, whatever you want to call it. It would take a bit of, would have to go through a consultation process. There'd be a bit of a problem there. But nevertheless, if we somehow manage to play it properly, we could get the Conservative government, which has been talking about promoting walking and cycling in urban areas, to say, yeah, this is good. We support this and we will give you a loan to carry it out and so on. And also we could lean on the mayor, who's also talked about it, to go ahead. So, we might be able to get the two to work together, but bearing in mind that party politics and all the rest of it, we would have to be pretty lucky. So there we are, really.
Yeah, I definitely don't think, from what I know of those Northerners, they don't want London to go down.
Yeah.
That narrative's a weird one on me. When I'll let Simon come back in and then we'll go to Charles and Stephen.
Yeah, I hope it was just on the basis of Andy Burnham's tweets last week. What I was going to say was, yeah, the best case scenario, obviously, is this tips Sadiq finally into embracing smart road user charging, something that's long overdue happening, and kind of has been paved the way in a whole bunch of discussions with his talk about boundary charges and the ULEZ expansion and what have you. So that would be the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, or possibly weirdest case scenario, maybe, is this is yet another negotiating mitigating tactic from the DfT to steal another chunk out of TfL. We've already seen the Levelling Up Fund in London applied by government without oversight from City Hall. So could we see all of active travel just go straight to the Active Travel England Inspectorate and funded directly from the DfT? Gilligan clearly, you know, quite keen on active travel, not so keen on Will Norman and Sadiq's approach. So could we see specific chunks of effectively what is TfL turf taken out of TfL as part of the next settlement? Who the flip knows? I certainly am waiting with interest, but some large amount of trepidation about this. We've already written, by the way, to Alex Sharma and Grant Shapps about the issues with climate here. So basically, you know, we've got a handful of years, less than a handful of years, to get London really shifting on climate. And all of this current approach of having 6-month rolling bailouts is totally destroying London's ability to forward plan on this stuff, and really push the boroughs and do all sorts of other stuff. You know, I think Bob mentioned cycle training. Basically, loads of boroughs in London, despite the fact that Boris Johnson said every child, every adult can have cycle training, etc., as a commitment in gear change. We've had loads of London boroughs have run out of funding for cycle training, so we can't train cyclists at the moment, train people to cycle. And that's kind of happening across the board. So that 6 month, then 6 month, 6 month means boroughs really need to race to deliver or they fail. You know, TfL isn't able to do any big long-term schemes, etc. So that really has to change fast.
Cheers for that, Simon. Charles, do you want to come in?
Yeah, this is sort of indirectly related. The point Carlton made last week about the cycling bodies joining up with public transport, you know, is something we need to be doing more of. And I don't know how influential Cycling UK are, but Carlton said they're not members of the ECF. And I take it you guys, or some of you guys, know well Cycling UK, Roger Geffen or whatever. Should they be nudged to do that? And more importantly, should they be nudged to join the public transport body? Was it UITP, which is a big international one? Is this a space we need to be pushing more, or is this just, you know, not worth the effort? And is Cycling UK the right one?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my point of order to go over last week. So yeah, Cycling UK got in touch with us and said the reason they aren't like part of the European Cycling Federation is that there's money attached to it. They'd have to pay a fee and they'd have to lose a member of staff. Plus, like, Sustrans are already part of it. So I kind of feel like, you know, we went a bit hard on that. They're definitely like aligned with them. We all kind of know them, but they're not formal members because there's a cost involved. I think there's
what about the UITP? But surely that's the more important thing, getting cycling and active travel teamed up with public transport.
Yeah, no, yeah, so I can't comment on that. They just came back on the other one in there, but like I think Cycling UK are doing pretty well on our front and on the big issues as well. Just in general, that's what my point is on that. But definitely, Carlton's point still stands that like the more we all join up, the better. But you know, there's different methods of it. Stephen, come on in.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to flag up what I put in the comments. If anyone's in London or in Camden, we've got Sadiq Khan at the Eversholt Centre tonight, which is just by Mornington Tube, and he's going to be talking on keeping emissions down and amongst other things. He's already been out and had some protests about Silvertown Tunnel. So it's really about that. None of us can really understand why there's 2.2 billion going on that. And unless there's something really dodgy that we don't know about going on. Otherwise, it looks like he's going to go to Grant Shapps as he did before when he let go of the congestion charge during COVID, if you remember that. He opened up that for key workers, but instead of just allowing key workers to go through, he let every motorist go through, which didn't help with motoring culture in London, I think, with speeding and so on. So there's all this tangled mess still going on with Grant Shapps and the government seeming to come in and bail out London. It might happen again. While in the background, the government is sneaking through the roads programme, which I still would have assumed most people know about it, but RIS2 still hardly anyone knows about, unfortunately. HS2 is a big thing. I'm with XR Roads and XR Camden,
And we're pushing, it's this two-pronged thing. It's EVs, all the EVs are being sold at the same time as they're expanding this huge road network. We've got, what is it, 16,000, I think, by 2025, 16,000 miles of road. These figures just bamboozle me. So we've got 24 billion going on the roads by 2025, then another 30 billion for the next 5 years, and another 30 billion after that. So it's a massive program, and that's the same. That's to get all these EVs, to sell all these EVs. It's a Green New Deal. Same thing's happening in America, by the way. If anyone saw this horrendous picture of the president the other day in his massive, great SUV. So I would say, if you can, if you want to support XR Roads or TAN, Traffic Action Network, who we're helping out in keeping this road building plan at bay, we want a review and a halt of that, as Wales have done. Wales stopped theirs successfully, and now they're doing some great things for active travel. So we want that to happen, but it won't happen unless we want loads of people responding to consultations, which is a bore and a chore, but we need tens of thousands of people doing that. Was it Highways England who are undertaking that? So yeah, a mixture of things there. The Silvertown Tunnel, which we need to protest about tonight, and wherever, if you see Sadiq Khan cropping up at your own town hall around London, you could get that same message out there. And in the meantime, there's a separate road building plan going through. I think that's all.
Yeah, that's enough to chew on, Stephen. But like it was a good one because he kind of had the issues, and also I think like the people that are leading the solutions as well, it's like the Welsh and Lee Waters, and like Lisa's put another link into there. So really, I think finding out the way the Welsh government is approaching the roads building and the processes they're applying to it, and the decarbonisation agenda on top of it is really cutting edge stuff, and I definitely recommend people go along and look at it. If it's anything like what I've been hearing, sounds very exciting, and I'm hoping that'll rub over onto the rest of the UK as well. Yeah, there was some other big hot topics in there, Steve. Absolutely sure, and there was a few things as well. The congestion charge thing, I think was noticed. Is that me? Have I been signed out? Am I still here?
Yeah, you're still there.
Yeah, no, all sorts of things flashed up on my computer then, but it's all right. Anyway, yeah, no, I'm just rambling on anyway. I'm probably was going to reveal far too much of it, carrying on for another 2 minutes of what I know, but really interesting stuff all around. Bob, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, just a quickie. There's in the chat, Kate Carpenter raised the issue because when I talked about the EV charging as part of condition for new developments, and I talked about why shouldn't we have good quality, secure and convenient cycle parking. A couple of people have mentioned that they push for that in their local authority plans. And Kate said, how about a petition to make it a national standard? I don't know what people think about that. If Cycling UK has pushed for it, where it is, should it just be left to local people to push for? I don't know. I mean, there are so many problems with the whole planning thing anyway, that we have these very sort of car-dependent developments. You know, we don't want to let having some cycle parking go in as a sort of fig leaf. So I don't know if people have got any ideas about that.
Yeah, I think Mark wants to come back in. Definitely, he's our guy on cycle
parking. Unless there's anyone else that's a planner here, Graham or something. But it's already in NPPF. It's already a requirement, National Planning Policy Framework. It's already there. The local plans, councils are being obliged to rewrite. I don't think this applies to London, but councils outside London are being obliged to rewrite all their local plans for next year. And usually the way that they deal with cycle parking is as a SPD, special planning document, supplementary planning document on parking, which is on all parking. So they usually lump cycle parking and car parking in one document. Now, the better authorities like Cambridge, for example, will do it as a separate document. And the other ones, like probably Hertsmere, I'm guessing, I have no data for this, but I'm guessing, will lump it as one paragraph, somewhere tipped at the end of how many car parking spaces you need to put, and you'll say, oh, by the way, you need some cycle parking. So there's a, and that fulfills NPPF. So planning is still a localized thing, but it then goes to an inquiry, and the planning inspectorate will determine whether the local plan is good enough. So the way to do it is to get in at the planning inspectorate level and to get the planning inspectors that agree the local plans to have a minimum standard. Sorry, that's very bureaucratic and planning-led answer. But it needs to be somebody like Linda Addison, former chair of Transport Planning Society, or somebody who has an in with the planning inspectorate, because they work on it's very much a great and the good, high and mighty type organisation. So if you go in at that level, there's a possibility of getting it in there because it's quite devolved. Sorry, that was a lecture on planning there.
No, that was good. Oh, yeah, we need to get you in to give us a full lecture on planning one of these weeks there. Mark, I'll be.
Oh, I'm not a planner. No, you need a proper planner, a proper RTPI person.
Proper planner with that. Okay, let's shift into like our first talk now, our big talk of the evening, and I'm going to introduce Dustin in a minute. But I think while we're listening to this, what I'd like everybody to do, because we'll have a little bit of a debate at the end of it as well, is think about low traffic neighbourhoods and think of the way that we're consulting on them. And is there anything that's going wrong? Could we help? Is what Dustin's about to talk about going to help with different ideas? Let's all get that running through our brains as we go through. But Dustin, I hope you're there, and I want to introduce you now. Dustin from AB Streets, please be there. There you go. Good to see you.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for inviting me here. I'm Dustin, and right now I'm based in Seattle, but literally in a week I'll be living somewhere in London. So yeah, I'm very excited about this move and getting more involved. Yeah, and I guess what I'll talk about today is just a really quick overview of some of the work that I do, and then focus on this new tool that's planning low traffic neighborhoods. So I guess my background is I'm kind of a software engineer who's been interested in computer games, or I got into programming through computer games many years ago. And I also really like maps. And so a while ago, I started working on a traffic simulation. And the idea of this traffic simulation is to advocate for better cycling and public transit. And this effort kind of started around Seattle, where I'm based, but it works anywhere, and a lot of the focus will be shifting. So the first thing I'll really quickly show you is what does a traffic simulation look like? Well, you get a detailed picture of what what streets look like in terms of actual lane usage, and potentially how a traffic signal works. And then you also find some data about where people travel. And then at that point, you can simulate individual people taking trips. So here we have this cyclist, and they're traveling from somewhere here off map. And so in this simulator, you can follow individual people. You can see that they're currently struggling up a hill. You can also kind of take an aggregate view and just look for where delays are piling up, and do a whole bunch of things, kind of measuring individual people and also aggregate patterns. And then the thing that kind of makes AB Street a weird traffic simulator is it makes it particularly easy to change things. And so we have this really nasty road through the middle of Seattle downtown called Denny Way. And it's two general purpose lanes each direction. And if you try to cycle on it, you're absolutely crazy. So let's fix that. We can edit this road. And if you've used a tool called StreetMix before, this interface is kind of meant to resemble that. So for example, we could take away one of the eastbound lanes and convert this into a cycle lane. And then go ahead and add in some kind of protection so that it's not just paint. Maybe we'll stick in planters. And according to the calculations of this, this adds about 5 feet to the road. And so maybe there's physically not space for this. We could always take away a lane in the other direction to make sure that we have room, but also a lot of the measurements here are just based on imperfect data. So exactly what would work in real life is a little bit uncertain, but you can make changes like this. And then theoretically measure the effects on the simulation. That's one of the bits you can do. But I guess as the project kept going, we thought a lot about kind of getting more people involved, or getting more people interested in traffic planning. And so I think it was last December, we built this thing called 15-Minute Santa, which was meant to be an exploration of the concept of 15-minute neighborhoods that you can walk and bike to everything that you might need within about 15 minutes. And so This is a game in which you play. You can drive around as Santa, riding a bike or a cargo bike, or I guess a sleigh if you're absolutely crazy. And you have to deliver presents to a bunch of places. And whenever you get hungry, Santa, of course, like gets tired doing all this stuff, and so you have to recharge from a restaurant or a cafe every now and then. And those are shown in orange on this map. But you'll notice that they're not really very many of them. There's like some along this like commercial district, but there's a lot of just like single family zoning in this section of Seattle. And so luckily Santa has the power of upzoning. And so we could go take some of these single family units and convert them into like multi-use, shops plus high density housing, that kind of thing. And then whenever you play through this level, it's a little bit easier to make all the deliveries in time. And so when you actually play the game, you just kind of move Santa around and you have to like visit all of the houses and deliver presents. And you see things like this apartment complex has 22 housing units according to public data. And so it's much more efficient to deliver there. And so this is just meant to be like a kind of a comical take on the concept of 15-minute neighborhoods and getting high density housing next to high density housing next to commercial centers as a and this is meant kind of as a bit of an educational tool, much more so than planning. We've also done some other work with cycle network planning. So most recently, can just show you an example really quickly in I think it's like South Seattle. This is a tool that's meant to be so this view kind of shows you the existing cycle infrastructure in Seattle. The different shades of green are meant to represent painted lanes versus infrastructure that actually has like some kind of bollard separating it from the road. And in Seattle, especially, there's a lot of hills. And so a very relevant thing that you need to like reason about is, does your like where are the is the cycle infrastructure helping you avoid hills? And in some places it's really not. It kind of like the safe routes will just like cut right up the hill. But you can do different stuff with this. So for example, we can just plan a trip. As an example, let's say we want to go kind of from downtown down to this area called Columbia City. This will plan 2 routes for us. And so the one in bright red is the direct route. And if we kind of take a look at it, it's got a pretty good elevation profile. It's kind of downhill at the beginning and then mostly flat. But it's got a big problem, which is that like 60% of this is along a high stress road. If you kind of like zoom in, you can see exactly what that looks like. It's this massive road called Rainier. I think it's either the first or second most dangerous in Seattle. And it's got like 5 or 6 lanes most of the way. It's an absolute nightmare. Or you can take the alternate route, which is a lot less stressful, but you can see from the elevation profile, you're going up and down, and it's a lot longer. And yeah, this is kind of the trade-off in a place like Seattle. You can do something fast and direct, or you can pay the hill penalty. So to encourage more people to take this the cycling route, we have this tool that just lets us draw in bike lanes really quickly. And instead of editing one street at a time like I showed you earlier, you can just do it really quickly. So let's fill in Rainier. We can just like click and kind of select most of the street. And then this thing lets you decide how you, if you just want paint or if you want some kind of protection. And then if we click add bike lanes, it'll try to fill this out automatically. And so like the width of Rainier kind of changes at different points, but the software will make kind of a best guess about how to fit things in. And then if it doesn't work, it'll kind of tell you about it. But now it's changed all this area. So if we go back to the same trip, now the fast and direct route is also pretty safe. Yeah, it looks like there's only like one little section that's in an area without any cycle infrastructure. So this tool is kind of meant for like long range cycle network planning, and it's particularly well suited if a place has elevation, and that kind of forces like the direct route versus the safe route to be very different. But as of I'm really losing track of time. Maybe like a month and a half ago, we switched focus to building a tool to think about low traffic neighborhoods. So let's look at an example in Leeds. I think there's some good ones there. So the point of this tool is just inspired by some different Twitter threads and a bunch of different diagrams about how people are kind of communicating schemes for low traffic neighborhoods. And so all of this is just like very early work and in active development and stuff. But so far, some stuff that you can do is first kind of select your neighborhood and exactly what is a neighborhood. The way that the tool defines it at the moment is it's an area, it's a residential area that's like bounded on all sides by a major road. And definition of major road kind of comes from OpenStreetMap's classifications. And like it's generally like a primary or secondary road according to that. But of course, this could be adjusted in the software if it isn't quite meaningful. So then once we've selected this neighborhood, like what do all of these colors mean? We can switch between two kind of equivalent views. This colors by street, and this just tries to expand that to an area around the streets. But the color is basically what areas can you reach within this neighborhood without leaving the neighborhood. So for example, from these green streets, all of these are interconnected, and you can reach every green street from every other one without going out to a major road. Whereas like this purple road, you can't go from the purple to the green or from the purple to the blue without leaving the neighborhood. And so from this, you can kind of see some like obvious like shortcuts and rat runs that might occur. And if you want to adjust these things and kind of try to fix it, what you can do is just click on a street and it'll pop in a filter there. And we can also do the same thing at intersections. If it's a four-way intersection, you can make kind of a diagonal filter one way or the other. And right now this has had no effect on the color. And then that's because the filters don't really do anything in terms of connectivity. All it'll do is force drivers to kind of like detour around things. But if we think about how to actually make this sealed off, this is maybe a difficult example. Maybe I'll switch to an easier neighborhood. I feel like there was one. Yeah, okay, maybe here. Let's drop a filter here. We just want to like affect the connectivity. There we go. So we have this big yellow area, and like from this you can get to any other part of the yellow area. And if we drop in a filter, actually just this one section along Batcliff Mount, then it kind of like bisects this part of the neighborhood. And now from the green area, you can kind of enter in and get to whatever these houses are. But the rest of the yellow area is sort of disconnected from that. And so that's basically what the tool does at the moment. You can put filters in different places and then see the effects on the transportation. Actually, I'm going to switch to another map that I think I know a little bit better. This is part of Camden Town in London. And I think some of the neighborhoods, like actually creating new low traffic neighborhoods out of them is like a little bit difficult. You need a bunch of filters, but there were at least a few examples somewhere around that were a little bit easier. Sorry, I should have prepared and like remembered a good spot to try this out. Yeah, maybe here, where I think like a couple of filters will, yeah, we can like create new cells from a couple of filters. So the other thing this tool lets you do is kind of look at the impact on vehicle routing from a broad perspective. So for example, we can just find a route, and this is a route taken by a car. Let's say that we're going from here kind of all the way across here. The question is, will this route try to cut through this particular neighborhood or not? So according to the kind of routing engine, actually, like right now, this route doesn't really want to cut through the neighborhood. It's advantageous time-wise to trace along the major roads instead. That's supposedly faster. But of course, the problem comes in when the things aren't actually moving in free flow. Like if you have a lot of traffic backed up on these major roads during rush hour, then people might be tempted to cut through here because it actually is a shortcut. And maybe, yeah, we'll just like start the route over here to make that even more likely. But to kind of adjust the assumptions about where or about the level of traffic, we have kind of a little tool here. And as we assume that there's more traffic along arterial roads, according to the software, it might be advantageous to kind of cut into the neighborhood here and skip this little section of St. John's Grove or whatever, just to like maybe this area kind of backs up, and it could be advantageous to take this shortcut. So assuming this kind of like is reasonable, and like I'll kind of make a disclaimer that like all of this is is based on just like map data that's available and a lot of different assumptions. But like, of course, people living in an area know where the rat runs really are. And hopefully this tool, like the idea is for this tool to let you also express, like, you have your own local knowledge, you know where the problems are. And so you can kind of hint to the tool, like, this is the real problem or something like that. But anyway, so like this particular path in the situation maybe causes a rat run here. So we can go back to the tool and maybe like, let's just add a filter to this blue area. And I think just one or two should do the trick. Yeah, maybe we need two, not entirely sure why. They're probably bugs. But if we go back to the pathfinding and try to do the same thing and still assume that, yeah. So now we have, you'll see that there are two paths that occur. The blue one still tries to cut through the neighborhood, and that's right through the filters that we've placed. And so the blue is kind of like what happens before you make any changes. But if we add these filters, then under these traffic conditions, the route is still forced to use the arterial and stay out of the neighborhood, which is likely the intention. And we can measure exactly according to the pathfinding engine, like what's the difference between these two routes, and it's 260 feet of difference or whatever. And so, you know, through this we've kind of been able to like measure the impact of it. Yeah, so that's what the tool does at the moment. There's some other stuff kind of planned, but a lot of it also depends on feedback, excuse me, from people and like hearing about what would be interesting for this tool to do. And I guess like the last thing I'll mention is how do you find all of this stuff? So luckily, like right now I'm running it locally on my computer, but you can run it also in your web browser. If you go to ltn.abstreet.org, and I can put that in the chat in a minute, this will bring you to just the page kind of describing this tool, and you can find the other tools along here. But there's a web version of all of this stuff, and so it's a lot slower to initially load, but you don't have to install anything. And so this is a great way of just trying things out. And so yeah, we can get the same tool kind of running in the browser, and it should more or less work the same way. The second question you're likely to have is how do I run this in an area that I'm interested in? So up in the corner, all of the different tools have this thing to change the map. And there's a whole list of places that have kind of already been imported. But most likely the area you're interested in is not imported yet. And so the simple answer is send me an email or file an issue on GitHub, or just otherwise tell me the area that you want, and I'll kind of import it as I have time. If you download the software, you can also do this yourself. There will be an option to import a new city, and it'll lead you through some instructions. But the main step is basically to go to this particular tool, zoom in on the area that you want, which is not the ocean, and then draw kind of a polygon and just like draw a boundary around the area that you want to study. And it'll generate all of these coordinates. And if you send me these coordinates, I can import that area. And there's some stuff to keep in mind with the import. Like you probably can't import all of all of an entire city. Like the bigger area you import, the larger the file is, and like the slower the loading is going to be. So there's a little bit of tuning that we have to do. But yeah, that's kind of an overview of what the software does, and I'm super interested to hear about or how people might want to use this kind of thing. And Zoom appears to have frozen.
It's all right here. Are you still with us, Dustin?
Yeah, sorry. Can you,
yeah,
are you able to?
Oh.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Yeah, we can still hear you, mate.
I'm stuck in screen share. This is super weird.
I'll stop your screen sharing. Don't you worry.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah.
I'll stop share. There we go.
Okay.
We're all good.
Yeah, my interface is still assuming that I'm screen sharing, but as long as you can't see my screen, I guess that's fine.
I think we're all right, aren't we, everybody? Yeah. There we go. Yeah, we're ready to grill you if you can see us, Dustin. Is that all right?
Yeah, I can't see you, but that's okay.
It's good job you can't say. I look completely rough today, so I'm full of disease. But yeah, Dustin, I just wanted to add like Dustin handily did a little map of me for a workshop I did the other week. Oh, in St Albans, I will mention the place. And yeah, basically we're doing because there's a really good tool where you can just click through the rat runs, where we're just kind of like, here's the area, here's all the rat runs, and and how do we solve them with the smallest amount of filters. So it was a really good online way of doing it. And what I particularly like about it is that it is online and everybody can have a go at it. You're not, once you apply all that assignment modeling type stuff in there, you can put it in the hands of people, and that's why I like doing it in a workshop. To go, well, where should we do it? Oh, I think there. Oh, maybe there. So it worked pretty well in practice. People got really into the concept, Dustin, but I just kind of introduced it as maybe something to do. But anyway, I just wanted to share that feedback with you. And then we'll move on to a couple of questions. So Steve coming on, man in Leeds. What have you got to ask?
All right. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Dustin. That was a really good presentation. I cycled at that top end of Leeds. That's where I worked, up at Beckett Park. And it's such a powerful tool. I was just thinking Leeds City Council have only got one low traffic neighbourhood up in Headingley. And they should have many more. And they said they're going to build 800 kilometres or something daft like that of cycle routes. But wow. I think that's all greenwashing. They've cancelled the clean air zone. But I can see how we could use this to counter the argument that Leeds have for cancelling the clean air zone and perhaps suggesting better routes through the city, especially avoiding close proximity to traffic. I do take issue with crossing lots of little crossings. I know they have got little cycle routes through Leeds, but they are blooming dangerous because you're crossing junctions all the time. And I think you can look at the danger of that. What I would really love to have seen was to look at the flow rate comparison of using more cycling as opposed to traffic in terms of traffic volume, whether you could reduce traffic volume by increasing the number of cyclists. I know with discrete event simulation like FlexSim, you can do all of that. I do have a PhD in simulation actually in engineering, where it was more the 3D stuff, but it's such a powerful tool. I've used things like FlexSim to show flow rates, and you can actually get some real data as to what different scenarios are. But I think it's really good. That I wouldn't mind having a play with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. The question of like, if you build this new infrastructure, how many people might change their behavior? This is like, in my mind, this is still the thing that I don't understand how to model properly. And so I think like the third tool, the cycle planning thing that I showed you has a mode called predict impact, and it tries to initially do this, and it exposes all of the crazy assumptions that it makes to you so that you can be very clear about how like fraught with peril these estimates are. But yeah, like this is an area that I'm very interested in trying to learn about and like start to model.
No, it was very useful, and I could see a lot of potential for it. I just wondered if you could link it to some other engine, like a discrete event simulation, to get some data off it. Get some spreadsheets of traffic flow and safe routes and the least number of junctions you have to pass, and you could work out some really safe fast cycle routes to the train station, for example. But I can see it being a really powerful tool and a good one for testing different scenarios. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, and just say Dustin is like working with Professor Lovelace as well at Leeds. He pretty much writes the book and that sort of stuff. So hopefully we'll bang their heads together on that one. I'll move over to Julio. Good to see you. I haven't seen you for ages. Good to see you, mate. Looking good.
Yeah, I was tempted in by the agenda item. Good to see you too. Yeah, Dustin, I think it looks really, really great. I don't know if you know, William Petty has been doing something similar in the UK. It's less kind of engaging and responsive, but I think it builds a similar view of cells and looks to generate similar outputs. I think for me, the really big use is in community engagement exercises and co-design, especially in building. I think a lot of people really struggle in understanding why you need to filter a street that is already quiet. And there's this real perception that, you just filter the one rat run without understanding that will have a knock on and it will displace the rat run onto other streets. And it really will build an understanding of the kind of holistic nature of the approach. I think the other thing that it really does is and I've done this a lot with communities and tried to get them to co-design, and it's really hard, but I think what it does really well is it makes you understand why you're having to drive further and kind of how the two are inevitable. There's this real struggle of understanding that the only way to have a low traffic neighborhood is for every property to only be accessed from one boundary road, and that inevitably leads to this time tax, which hopefully this tool will help improve. I'd say there are obviously limits on whether it ought to be a design tool. I think it's quite a fine line. There's a lot of design considerations into where a filter should be placed that are very difficult to capture in such a simple tool, especially things around the size of the access cells and the kind of boundary roads that they feed onto, and ensuring that they don't disproportionately affect some boundary roads, particularly those that maybe we have residential housing or low income housing, and also around kind of refuse reversing distances and the placemaking potential filters. There's just a lot of I'm just always a little, it's a really good engagement tool. I think there's a bit of a risk of it being perceived as a design tool, so I think just like maybe some wording around that would be beneficial. My biggest concern though, and I think it's linked to kind of low traffic neighborhood design in general, is that initial assumption of what is a boundary road. And I think there's a bit of a risk here that we actually don't go ambitious enough. I think the historical road classification in the UK is very car-centric, and there are a number of roads that are deemed as strategic, which need not be strategic. And the best examples, we heard earlier about Old Bethel Green Road, which has been filtered, Francis Road, Orford Road, all the places where actually have to be the hubs of the low traffic neighborhood in a tool that is just based on free classification will suggest that those remain open to through traffic. So I would really kind of, there's not a super simple solution, and many local authorities are doing their kind of street classification exercise to question that, to say, do we actually need all these B roads to be open through traffic? But I think building that into the tool somehow to make sure that the cells are bigger and are more ambitious, particularly in areas where there's mix of uses, the availability of public transport is greater and reliance on the car is lower, would be really, really important. It's very detailed, but I'm really keen to take this conversation online because I think I would love to use this tool all the time, but it needs a little bit more of that kind of knowledge.
Yeah, some of the things you mentioned are kind of in the pipeline slowly. Like this tool has sort of only been in active development for about a month, and now it's like slowing down as I'm looking into like moving logistics and stuff. But yeah, like especially defining the boundary of like what is a neighborhood, and what are the roads that are major versus minor for like in the scope of the tool. Like I want to give people the ability to draw the boundary themselves, because yeah, sometimes you want to like merge two adjacent neighborhoods that the tool defines, or sometimes you just want to like draw a boundary based on your own knowledge, or to like make sure that there's not a rat run along, or to make sure that there's not a lot of displaced traffic along a road that even if it is classified as major, like you don't want a lot of traffic there. But yeah, so and to the other point, yeah, I think like all of the work in AB Street is like not meant to be like the final answer or to like mislead people into thinking like this is a good idea. It's all of it is meant sort of as a communication and as a rapid prototyping tool. And like after you get something in AB Street, the idea is like whatever process you were doing before to kind of validate the results and make sure that it's a good idea, like you should still go do those. It's just meant to be like a new initial step to kind of like get people interested and get people talking. But we have to communicate that very carefully, I think.
Well, I'm already excited that you two are speaking. I'll add more into the mix. Ruth, come on in.
Thank you. Thanks, Dustin. It was hard to keep up with your very fast speaking, but thank you very much. This is a layperson's thing. I mean, the issue seems to be, though, with LTNs or whatever we call them, is people's perception of how they are going to work, because people still presume they want to be able to drive as much as they always did. So, for example, I was talking to a man the other day about Ealing, low traffic neighbourhoods, and he said the problem is it took him longer to collect his daughter when she was coming home. And his daughter was 23. Well, at 23, I lived in London, didn't have parents here, didn't have a car, didn't have Uber, didn't have night buses, didn't have night trains. We just got around. There still seems to be this thing of, yes, but I still want to drive as much as I always did without thinking through enough. I know this will take time and thing, but I think it's also a demographic thing as well. That younger people who live in different areas might accept it because they don't have cars anyway. But our problem is when we're in these middle-aged, middle-class areas who still want to drive. So it's not really a question, it's just explaining how difficult it is to get this over, I think. Right,
I've seen exactly the same kind of problem in Seattle. Like I went to a design event, or sort of like a design charrette for reimagining like this highway that kind of cuts through the middle of town, and like some of the feedback there was just effectively people like complaining about all changes to the city and like wanting things to be exactly as it was like 30 years ago, and wanting driving to be exactly as convenient it was when like less than half of the population of Seattle was there or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I personally don't have a lot of knowledge about how to respond to things like that. I'm kind of just the software person.
Yeah, we'll worry about that on your behalf. Don't worry, Dustin. I'll bring in Vivian now.
Yeah, I've got another sort of comment or question from Leeds. So I was just sort of I've just been looking at this because in Leeds over the next couple of weeks, we're going to do some consultation on another couple of active travel neighbourhoods. I think in a way, actually, Justin, maybe what you were saying in response to some of Julio's points is sort of maybe covered some of my thinking. Because the area I was looking at, there was basically just a road to the left of it, of my area that I wanted to include as well. So I was going to ask, can we define our own boundary or our own cell, whatever we want to call it? So I think you've already covered that. But otherwise, I think it looks really promising. I would, yeah. If it wasn't just if I did have that ability to, I think, select my own area that is within the scope of what we're looking at, I think I'd be happy to sort of try it out in focus groups that we're running on Zoom for our active travel neighbourhoods. Maybe, but yeah, but yeah, I'd be interested in if anyone else actually has any thoughts on how it would work with directly doing this with the public, or whether this is maybe more a tool where you need sort of informed stakeholders to be looking at it instead. I'd yeah, be interested in that.
Do you want me to talk about that? Just like it, because that's what I've been trying to figure out, and clearly that's in Julio's mind as well. What's the best way of doing this? So when I was doing a kind of collaborative planning session the other week, and I was trying to use it, I was like, do we get people to just go to a link and then all edit it? Will they be able to track each other? And I didn't know. And in the end, I just kind of talked people through, here's a kind of approach. If people are interested, we could do it like this. Because the big joy of it for me is if we could be collaborative, and then really people decided roughly where filters were, and then the likes of me and Julia could come in and local authorities and go, okay, it's decided amongst themselves how they're going to reduce some of the through traffic. Here's the kind of plan that they see. Let's give that a go. And it just, for me, that would save about 3 years worth of conversation and heartache if we could do that. I'd rather it was like, put one there, and then we go through all the logistics of actually managing it, the vehicles could turn and all that. And if there was some kind of method of jumping to that stage, like through people deciding that's the big joy of it for me, and that would make my life significantly easier and help transform the country and decarbonize it. So they were the kind of big ones for me. But I'll bring in Simon now, because I'm sure, unless Dustin, did you want to come back on that one, or did I answer for you?
No, that's okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm taking notes. I still can't see anyone's face.
All right, no worries. Well, we'll have the video up. You can see what we all look like next week. I'll go over to Simon Monk and I'll try and press a few buttons in my feverish state and see if I can unfreeze your screen as well. Simon, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating tool so far. So Dustin, congratulations, and I'll look forward to trying it out at some point soon. I was just going to say, to really echo Julio's point about bus gates and, you know, B roads and stuff like that. I think whether it's something that can be built into the tool, but more likely it's just a criteria that we need to evolve over time about when is a boundary road not a boundary road and should be part of a cell effectively is a real question that I'm grappling with over and over again. And you started to see in London again, like Julio named a couple of schemes, but I think the ones for me are Stoke Newington Church Street is like a massive shift there that's just like transformatory, and Bishopsgate, you know, in the heart of the city. So you've got schemes with major bus routes through them, not just, you know, like Francis Road, Norfolk Road and Waltham Forest. Got to big them up because that's my hometown, but you know, they're tiny little hopper buses trundling through once every 15 minutes. But we're now talking about bus gates in the middle of what are effectively LTNs for major bus routes, and I think that really has a power to it that we're only just starting to talk about and unlock, and has a power for certainly very dense cities like London to really unlock a lot of change. So I think that's worth considering somehow, but whether it's within the scope of this, I suspect it's not within the scope of this tool, but it's a guide or it's a document or it's someone doing some thought about when to trigger that point, you know, in the future.
Yeah, I think at least being able to turn on a layer and see like all of the different bus routes that already exist in the area, and then see when they might either pass through a road that you're trying to put a filter on, or if they pass on a road where you might see more displaced traffic. Both of those things, like, I think it's possible in software to at least anticipate that and point it out to the users so that they're aware that there could be a complication there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that. That'd be a must-have in London, sure. I mean, you look at some streets like Tooley Street and over London Bridge, where you have gone, you know, pretty much only bus through routes are amazing. We don't really have to do much else when that happens. I'll bring in the good professor himself. Robin, come on in.
Hey Brian, how's it going? Yeah, just got some follow-up comments that hopefully are useful about what AV Street actually is. Like, I think it's useful to know that it's like an engine rather than one specific thing, and it can do a whole range of different things, whether it's playing Santa, which is cool, or designing low traffic neighborhoods or other stuff. And to answer Julio's comment about maybe we could use it to be more bold, you can already do that. So you can take an arterial A road if you want and turn it into a cycleway. And I'm really interested in that in Leeds. So big up the Leeds massive this week. There's loads of comments about Leeds for some reason, but Chapeltown Road I think would be great as a completely pedestrianised road like Oxford Street in London. That's doable. I mean, you know, I can imagine it in my head, but the fact that I can now represent that in a simulation that's based on some kind of reality, to me is pretty revolutionary. You certainly can't do that in the propensity to cycle tool, which has also been mentioned. So I've just got some comments about how I think this can be framed. So the first thing to say is it's an open and participatory tool, and it's not just the experts. And I think that was a good thing that the propensity to cycle tool did. It gave some models of the transport system to the people, and they've been used massively by cycle campaigners and loads of other people. So it's actually very empowering. And secondly, just think about, I think for me, it's useful to think about it in terms of the propensity to cycle tool. Like, it's useful for a first sketch of your strategic cycle network, but you're not going to design a gyratory junction of the type that Brian Deegan's probably designed several using the tool. So it's the same with the LTN tool. The idea is to get a first sketch to do your initial prototyping, and then you give it to the designers. And currently, the way things work, there's kind of just the idea, and then it goes straight into the design work, which is very costly. But it's to help get that ideation stuff going. So they're my comments on the tool, and I think it really can be used to empower people to reimagine how streets could look.
Yeah, I mean, my point of view, it'd be exciting to just roll out what does a net zero UK transport system work like, lay it all out in something like that, and then you go, okay, well that's why we're moving towards that. That there is enormous scope for this one. Give us way too many hard things to do, but that's what's gone in my head. Thanks for that, Robin. Have you got any more come back to say, Dustin, or are we all good? Any more questions from anybody?
Nothing else from me, I guess. Yeah, please get in touch if you want to import a particular area, but also for the next couple of weeks, I might be a little bit slow to respond.
Actually, we got one more question from you there, like Graham, come on in.
Hi, I thought it was a joyful tool, and I wish you well in your moving. I can't imagine moving home. It's would take too many trucks and too many hours. But from an urban design point of view, one of the fears that I've had, and this isn't really about the mathematics, well, maybe it is that the growth of LTNs, in some ways, and in my view, some terrible ways, starts to look like Design Bulletin 32. In other words, cauliflowers of stuff surrounded by inhospitable roads. And I've tried, in my minor way, at least with students, to suggest that we should also, especially in existing mature areas, we should be trying to make roads as seams rather than as dividers. And I don't know Seattle at all, and whether it's possible. But the main streets, the main routes, what would be read in a space syntax analysis, are likely to be the places that have retail and all the kinds of facilities that people might want to go to. They've got to be. I don't know whether just to say that it's a warning, I suppose. I mean, how do you make the boundary road into so that it's a desirable locus of activities? That's a question rather than the solution. I can't go any further. But we really got to be careful about not reinventing Design Bulletin 32, which I'm absolutely certain is in the back of the minds of some planners and some highways engineers.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I think in Seattle there kind of is the attitude, or like a lot of pushback against cycle lanes on some of the main roads that have commercial shops, is like, oh, you can just cut through the neighborhood and it's you know, it's safe there. Like, why do we need to make this change here and get rid of parking and stuff like that? And yeah, my pushback is always, well, you know, cyclists also want to go to the retail center or the retail sector and stuff like that. I think, like, yeah, right now the LTN tool as expressed has just been kind of following ideas and diagrams and pictures of LTNs that I've seen on Twitter and online and stuff like that. And so that's why that's why it's treating the arterial road as the boundary. But what I'm really overwhelmingly hearing is that, like, it's important to be able to express the boundary however you want and make sure that roads with with a lot of shops and stuff like that can be the interior of a neighborhood as well, and we can like traffic calm those as well. I'll think about how to make the software be able to express that better. Yeah, I know when I'm training people on it, I train people about internal measures and then perimeter measures as well. And really the perimeter measures you do for low traffic neighborhood, I think are just as important as dropping the filters in there. And that's where I think a lot of it's been going wrong, when people haven't considered they just think, oh, we'll drop a planter there. Is it all sorted now? But we have to think about the system. That's what's great about tools like yours, Dustin. And I think on behalf of everybody, we're going to welcome you to the UK when you get over here. I'll see you on London time. And it's very exciting having some of your skills and some of your software over helping us on these topics. So everybody should be excited. And yeah, I mean, like I say, I've already tapped up Dustin to help me with a workshop, and he's pretty good and pretty quick. So welcome aboard. I know you can't see us all, but we're all gushing with warmth for your software there, like Sega's on that one. Okay, so oh, sorry, Dave. Sorry, I've just seen your hand go up. Go on, Dave. You can have the last question. Why not?
Yeah, I was wondering, having been in Seattle, when I was there, was Pacific Freeway was in place. I mean, there have been some radical changes there in the traffic management over the past 30 years. And whether your sort of study of the way people route, Seattle's very much a contour route thing as well because of the hills. So it'll be interesting to see how you've been able to develop that and how the development's gone since. Is it the Pacific Freeway was demolished?
By the Pacific Freeway, do you mean the I forget the name of it? It was like the elevated highway running through downtown.
That's it.
Highway.
Yeah.
The Alaska. I can't remember the name of this thing. Yeah, it came down a couple of years ago. I guess for people not familiar with the area, there's this like elevated highway running through downtown Seattle, kind of blocking off the waterfront. But they that like when the next big earthquake comes, which it's is inevitable, this thing would like not survive. And so they had to they decided to dig a tunnel underneath Seattle to replace this route. And like the tunnel process was like very long and convoluted and had all these like financial snags and just like it took a long time. But then the promise was, okay, like we'll route traffic, we'll route motor vehicle traffic underneath Seattle, and then like it opens up the waterfront to be this nice, beautiful place. And then now what they're building is like a 10 lane highway or whatever with like tiny cycle path on the side, and like they're just completely the waterfront from like Pike Place Market and all the tourist areas. So like they kind of, I feel like they lied. They were like, we'll get rid of this this highway and make it a pedestrianized space, and like that just hasn't happened at all.
Oh, what a disappointment. I mean, and Peter Lagerway as well was quite active, but I don't know if he's still around. Remember Peter Lagerway?
Sorry?
Peter Lagerway. Is he still active?
I don't know that name, no.
No, this was going back to 1990 when I visited Seattle the first time. And
I'm not sure Dustin was born then. That's like let's give him a break. Well, I will say Seattle should look at Portland then, shouldn't they? Because they did a similar thing and got away with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get towards the end now. But yeah, cheers for that, Dave. Who knew we'd get so specific on Seattle? But yeah, thanks, Dustin. And we'll just go over to Ruth now, who's going to do the last word, and then we're going to see you all next week. Ruth, all yours.
Thank you. Bob Robert always puts the numbers of women to men. Today I cycled from Chiswick to London Bridge to meet my son. It's 9 miles each way. Flat, doable, really should be great. I have to say, Chiswick to Hammersmith, okay. Hammersmith getting round to Olympia, not great. Looking forward to the gyrator being done. Ken High Street was a disgusting mess of taxis, buses, lorries, just appalling. Into the park, that's absolutely fine, blah, blah. I go along the cycle route, don't know what, no, east-west cycleway. I don't know that London Bridge isn't on it. There's nothing that tells me that. I just assumed that I was going east and I would get to that bridge eventually. So I hit Tower Bridge, have to ask someone, have to go back. Then I had to go on the road and then go across London Bridge and try and find him near the Shard. Coming back was much easier. Somebody recently on the Dutch Cycling Embassy said a cycle route is only good as the weakest link. So I'm a very determined person, as you all know, and I will do that. And it was a beautiful day and there was no way I was going to use public transport, even though I'm entitled to do it for free. We have to have more joined up. We have to have better signage. And I should say today, I was probably one of the few women cycling on the east-west cycle superhighway during the day. I'm sure at commuter time, it's much bigger, but no one's going to do what I do if they aren't helped to do it. And then the taxi drivers can go, well, there you are, you see it's empty during the day. So this is, I know we're all on the same sheet here, but it is why I think women are not seen as much cycling. Thank you.